Hi, I'm Jesse,
Hi, I'm Adam, and I am the terror that flaps in the night.
and this is Boring Conversation.
Welcome to Boring Conversation, a Malifaux podcast.
All right, so welcome back for episode 2 of Boring Conversation. We will try not to bore you as much as we did last time. So, firstly, Adam, what are you drinking today?
So I just got out of work, and my wife was nice enough to make me an iced coffee, grown up iced coffee. I got some Kahlua in there, some Baileys out of a shoe.
Awesome. I have a Cyser that I made a couple of months ago. A Cyser is half mead, half cider, and it was made with like a cider blend of apple juice that I bought from a local homebrew shop, and half of the fermentables in it are Melaleuca or tea tree honey, and this bad Larry clocks in at probably about 13%. Pretty good.
Yeah. We'll see how you are at the end of the show.
That's why I have a small glass. Got to keep my wits about me, like a lady.
Yeah. So, Jesse, anything big happened this week?
Yeah. I was about to say, as expected, the Explorer Society book is out, and the internet is abuzz.
Yay!
Yeah, exactly. The internet is abuzz with talk of the explorers and how good or how bad, or, well, there's probably not too much how bad, but how good they are. So we thought we might chime in on a couple of things. So, I mean, last episode, Adam and I both kind of talked about some stuff that we were either interested in particular myself with DUA, which I now know is DUA, Division or Department of Ungentlemanly Affairs, not DUA. So DUA / Umbra. I'm just going to call them Umbra from now on because I can't be bothered with that DOA bullshit. And Adam spent a little bit of time talking about BB and Calypso, so I think we might get to them and the rest of their keyword in a minute here. But yeah, I guess I kind of wanted to start with just my hot take on Umbra. So, I mean, Adam, you had the opportunity to play against Umbra. We managed to get a game in, did we not?
Yeah, we did.
Yeah. So, I mean, just top of the mark, hot take. What are your thoughts if you can remember kind of how the game played out?
Um, they're the negative play experience of the negative play experience of Explorer Society.
Oh man.
They do everything well. They do everything well, and they make you not do anything well. And I don't know. They're tops for me. They're very good. It's very versatile. It's a summoner, so summoners are always very good. Um, I don't know. He's like Sandeep level for me. Probably
Yeah.
he's the Sandeep of Explorer Society. I think.
And we had a summoner off too because we played Dashel versus Ivan. So that made for a pretty interesting game because that was actually the first time that I've played against Dashel. I'd kind of learned, I've heard a lot about it thanks to the deep dive that you were on and just kind of reading over the cards. But yeah, I mean, considering what a good player I consider you to be and how good Dashel is, I did not expect to win that game. What was, I think, 8-5, something like that.
Yeah, and you know what's funny is like there's actually a lot of counter to Umbra with Dashel because you got a lot of the focus that goes out there. You get in those positive flips, so it counters out some of the concealment. But I mean, there's not much you can do about them. And sure, it's going to be that way. It's going to be swingy. It's a new keyword, so you have to play them a couple times. I kind of knew what I was going to expect from when we did the playtest, but you still have to feel them out, but I think even throughout it, they're going to be a powerful keyword. Almost too powerful, I would say.
Yeah, I would tend to agree, and I feel like it's easy to it's easy to feel that about a new keyword the first time or the first couple of times you play them, like you said. I do think that there are some things that can be done to really help mitigate how efficient the Umbra crew is, and there are definitely some weaknesses that can be exploited. But I think that they, more than a lot of crews that I've played, um, you really need to tech against them quite a bit. Quite a bit more than I think you need to in a lot of other crews. Like in many games, like if you have a basic understanding of how the enemy master works and your crew is well assembled, and you can execute your plan while working around your opponent's plan, or just knowing what they're going to be doing, how their mechanics work, usually you can kind of get by. I don't really feel like that's the case with Umbra. I feel like if you just try to play your game, they are going to absolutely punish you for it. And if you don't tech against them, you're going to have a bad time.
Yeah, no, I mean 100%. You have to be able to mitigate all the negatives they're going to be throwing at you, because you're just not going to be able to do anything. You're just not. And you have to build around that. But while you're building around that, you also have to build around your schemes. You have to build around the strat. I mean, he's a powerful summoner, and the thing that makes him, I think, powerful to me is he does dual purpose with his summon. He's doing damage plus he's summoning off of it. Which, yes, I mean, you can say it makes it risky, but I mean, you're gonna be saving a top notch card for it because it's generally summon. So he's a stat 6. There's not going to be many things he's going to be down a number on.
Yeah. There's not a whole lot of willpower 7 and 8 out there. Definitely not. I mean, you're not going to try and summon off of Zoraida or something like that. I mean, you just target something else.
Yeah, you just target something else, and I mean, all the minions are good. All the things you're summoning are good. It's not like you're summoning anything like useless.
Right. And the trick of it is that, like, yeah, you look at it and you say, well, my opponent can, my opponent can just cheat and make me fail, and then I can't get my summons off. Well, I mean, yeah, in one sense, yeah, it's kind of one of the only opposed duels that summons a model, from a master anyway. There's some other incidental summon models out there, but you're not going to attack something with Ivan and throw a high card unless you know you're going to win. So, yeah, you could draw into a crud hand, and then, okay, well, maybe you can't get a summon off this turn, or you just have to hope to flip for it. The thing with it is that, like, it's not like trying to summon with any other summoning master, Sandeep, Dashel, Summer. Like, you don't just try and top deck your summon with them if you don't have it in your hand. You just don't try it. With Ivan, you're like, all right, well, I mean, I've got a double positive on the attack because I'm distracted and you're in concealment. So I guess I may as well just flip one of those positives into a crow. I'll still be attacking you with a positive flip, and then I'll just hope that I flip a high card. And all right, great. Now I've got a summon.
And that's the thing too. Is like, not only are you spamming out negatives for the enemy, you're spamming out positives for yourself. Like,
Right.
everything this crew does is dual purpose. It's just full of efficiency.
Right. And the other thing is that, like, when you actually do get a summon off, it's not just that you're getting 2 AP out of 1, meaning the attack plus the summon. You're also summoning that model up to 10 inches up the board in base contact with an enemy model. So and if you're summoning a Deva, you're getting an attack out of it because they've got made to kill. So really, one Ivan summoning AP is equivalent to probably like 3 or even 4 AP, because you're getting damage, you're getting 10 inches worth of movement. Now, most summoners can summon within like a 6-inch bubble, so, whatever. But yeah, I mean, you're basically getting 10 inches of movement, and if you summon a Deva, you're getting another attack. So you're getting like 3 or 4 AP out of 1.
Yeah, so you're getting 3 or 4 AP out of 1. Plus, you're going to be able to do, you're going to have already 3 AP with him, plus the free move, because he's going to have a free move, because Explorer Society, everybody has some kind of leap equivalent. So you're not even wasting an AP to walk.
Right. Well, I mean, that's true. In some sense, you are still spending an AP, especially if you don't have any summons out, or if Mordrake isn't in a position upfield where you can shade step to him, because you do. If one of those situations doesn't apply, you do have to spend an AP to make a shadow marker with his Shockwave ability, so that you can then shade step to it. You don't really want to have to be doing that all on his activation. You want to try and get shadow markers out with other stuff, but there are plenty of situations where that may not be the case.
Oh, you mean his very good Shockwave ability that you're probably going to be doing anyway?
Well, you might be. You might be. I mean, if you had your druthers, you really want to be using what's the name of his ability? Hold on here. English Ivan. You really want to be using Runic Siphon 3 times if you can, because you're going to be getting an intercision trigger to summon on one of your 3 attacks, probably your first one, maybe not, and then if you can actually manage to get the shadow pin trigger off, I mean, ideally you want to be getting that off on maybe 2 enemy models, because now, assuming you're shooting through the aura generated by one of your own summons, which is concealing terrain, or shooting through a shadow marker, or Lord forbid, for your opponent's sake, shooting through a forest that's in the middle of the field, which I'll talk about in a second. Now you're doing, 3, 4, 5 damage, and you're giving staggered to potentially 2 enemy models from 10 inches away, which it's a good attack, not amazing, but it's costing your opponent a ton of efficiency because you're also staggering them. Never mind potentially being able to get his Encroaching Shadows ability off, which is going to push one of your models, cause tests for distracted, potentially give one of your models an attack. Like he's got a lot going on his card. I think he's probably the most aggressive summoner on his own card that I've seen. Like, Summer is really good. He's very aggressive, but his damage track is kind of cruddy. His big thing is that he can give out stunned, and he can do some irresistible damage at the cost of his own models. Ivan just has a ton of aggressive abilities on his card. And he still has support stuff on front of card, like passive auras and stuff like that. So, I mean, he's kind of the total package, in my opinion.
Yeah, so that's what I'm saying. He's well rounded,
Mm-hmm.
and he's well rounded because, again, he can do multiple things. He can summon, he can spam out damage, he can debuff, but then he also has those passive abilities, and he doesn't have any wasted AP to do anything, and he's got built-in positives pretty much all the time.
Yeah, I mean, usually he's going to be rocking, probably double positives on most opposed duels. Rarely, but possibly triple positives. Actually, no, he's almost never going to have triple positives because he's never going to have friendly fire, because his Runic Siphon is not a gun for probably exactly that reason. Because if it were a gun symbol, yeah, you couldn't do it while you were engaged, but it would also mean he would benefit from friendly fire, which at the moment he does not.
Which he doesn't, yeah. But he's going to have distracted because you're just going to give it to him. And then he's going to have the concealment. It's already a double positive. And a stat of 6. Might as well be a stat of 7.5, 8. You brought up Mordrake.
I did.
Like, can we talk about how silly Mordrake is for a minute?
Sure. So the only other thing I wanted to talk about with Ivan, before we get into Mordrake, is one of the things that I feel like is, if somebody's playing Explorers holistically and has a bunch of keywords, you're probably going to take Ivan a lot because he's very good. But one of the things that is going to be game breaking for your opponent with him in terms of the board is if there is a forest or other large concealing terrain piece that is close enough to your deployment zone that you can shade step to at first turn, and then he's just sitting and concealing for the rest of the game. So he's spending no AP. to move, because first turn he's shade stepping to the piece of terrain, and then on future turns he can shade step to other portions of the terrain to get out of engagement or to get further up the board. He never has to worry about shooting through concealing markers to get his positives. And he what do you call it? The only thing he really needs his shadow markers for at that point is damage prevention, which is such an enormous increase to his efficiency and threat that I can't overstate that. So if you are a TO, I would very strongly recommend that if you put up patches of concealing terrain, you make them small and you don't make them close enough to the deployment zone that your opponent can get to them with no problem, because otherwise Ivan is going to be an absolute terror to deal with.
And it's not like you're not going to have shadow markers. You're going to have them all over the place.
You are going to have shadow markers, but the difference between being able to shade step with 0 setup and just jump to a piece of terrain without having to spend AP with anything else, and try to move your models such that he can jump into their shadows, it's a big difference. And it also means that you are going to have a hard time dealing with him by shooting or doing other ranged attacks, because it's not like you can just, drop a blow it to hell and wipe out his shadow markers that he's hiding behind. Yeah, he can still lose his damage prevention, but he's still going to benefit from the concealment, which is significant.
Significant, yes.
So anyway, Mordrake.
Yeah, his totem.
Yeah, his totem's pretty good. He's not
really good,
busted.
right?
Yeah, I mean he's not busted. He's not, in my opinion.
I disagree.
He's very good.
I mean, he breaks 2 schemes. He breaks 2 schemes wide open.
Yeah. So tell me about that.
Vendetta. So essentially, here's the thing with Mordrake. He just doesn't die. He doesn't die. And It's not like you summon a new Mordrake. It's the same Mordrake.
Yeah.
If you summoned a new Mordrake, it would be completely different. But it's the same Mordrake. So you can just take him. He's only 6 stones. So you take him in Vendetta. And you kill the enemy. And he'll just never die. Never, ever, ever die.
Yeah. It does make it very easy to score the second point on Vendetta. He's he's pretty reliable at dealing damage. Stat 5 against move is pretty average. He's going to be even with most models. There are quite a few models that'll be above him and very few that'll be below him stat wise. But yeah, I mean, he's very good in Vendetta. To your point, I do feel like he should have a special rule where he cannot be chosen for friendly schemes. I don't think insignificant is the right call for him. I don't think he should be insignificant, because if he's insignificant, that's actually beneficial in things like public enemies, especially for a totem that you're going to have right in the opponent's face. At that point, I can, if I don't want to try and prevent public enemies points, I can just say, all right, fine, he dies. I'm not going to bring him back if the situation calls for it. And then my opponent isn't getting any points off of it.
I mean, you should just summon a new Mordrake.
But you can't summon Mordrake because he's an enforcer. Oh, yeah. No, I see what you mean.
They put anything on a card, they should be able to say, like, when he dies, take 2 damage off of and summon a new Mordrake that has already activated this turn or whatever. You know what I mean? Like, the thing is, by making him the same one, like, you can take him for Hidden Martyrs. He's that beautiful sweet spot where he's 6 stones. So he fits into the Hidden Martyrs.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, he's very, very good for a couple of schemes. You're absolutely right.
I mean, he's also permanent concealment marker, essentially. Like, he's never going to go away. I don't know how he is how he is. I mean, the Black Mirror, like, you can't even spam conditions onto Ivan, because you just put him onto Mordrake, and then he dies and you don't care. You know?
Right. Yeah, and the other benefit too is that, like, if you can in theory put conditions on Mordrake that you want to have on Ivan and just transfer them over there. Like, you can transfer shielded between them, you can transfer focus between them. It's not just negative conditions. They can share beneficial conditions as well. Well, not share, but they can transfer beneficial conditions as well, which in the right situation can be a pretty big deal. Like, if Mordrake is within range of Gibson and Gibson's not within range of Ivan, you can give Mordrake focus and then transfer the focus over to Ivan. But keep the fast from Gibson's trigger on Mordrake, because Ivan's not going to benefit from it.
I mean, he also has like that, essentially the Thune trigger on his attack.
He does have that. So in practice, I've gotten several games in with Ivan. I have only ever gotten that to go off once. It's way harder to do in practice than it is in theory, because Mordrake himself does not have a way to reliably drop shadow markers in base contact with the enemy. So it's not like with Thune where you're just targeting the enemy, hit the attack, hit the trigger, they turn into an ice pillar. On this one, you have to have a shadow marker in base contact with the enemy before you take the attack. Otherwise, it's not going to work. So if you have the tome on the first attack to drop a shadow marker in base contact with the target, and then you have the crow on the second attack, you could in theory do it, but that's very rarely going to be the case.
I guess. I mean, but he's not the only one that drops markers either.
No,
I mean,
no, yeah,
several models that drop markers. You have somebody big and beefy, you out activate them. Somebody else, you have Gibson, I don't know, drop a marker on the side of him, and then you have Mordrake go in and bury him.
Yeah, it's not impossible. Not by any means. It's just, it's not as easy as it looks. That's all I'm saying. It requires some setup, and it requires careful activation order. Yeah. And as I'd mentioned before, if people are playing into Umbra, hopefully they're going to be teching into them with some kind of marker removal, preferably Blow It to Hell. Unfortunately, not all the factions have Blow It to Hell, but if you're playing into Umbra and you have that, you should take it, because you're going to need it.
Yeah, I want to say you do, but at the same time, it's almost like you can't keep up. I mean, you can't keep up with the markers they're going to be spitting out.
You're never going to keep up. No, I mean, it's the same thing as like playing with, it's the same thing dealing with like Raspy or any of the other marker generating masters. You're never going to keep up, but it's going to let you, if you're careful about your activation order, deal with the most problematic markers, whatever those may be. And that takes a lot of reading of the situation.
So what do you think are his best summons?
His best summons, all of them.
What do you think you're going to use? What do you think you're going to use the most?
Probably Devas. Devas are going to get used the most because you can only summon a Brock Inspector off a willpower 6 or greater target. That's another thing that your opponent can do when they're building their crew and teching against you, is if they can avoid taking many or any willpower 6 models, that shuts down your ability to hire or to summon Brock Inspectors.
That's what I did against you.
Right, exactly. And Brock Inspectors are real good. They're real good. So if I'm not able to summon those, that's a significant hit to my punching power. Devas are still very good, and I think that they're probably what you're going to see get summoned the most. If your opponent makes the mistake of bringing enough willpower 6 models for you to target, and you can get 2 Brock Inspectors on the field, they're going to have a real bad day. Those things are not easy to deal with at all. Yeah, I mean, Devas have Mimic, which is great. Now, the thing with Devas is, and this is kind of a big deal, so the summon upgrade is unique in that it does not give the models slow when they get summoned, which most summons, well, I don't know, but I shouldn't say most. The majority of the summons that I've seen do come in with slow. Ivan's do not. They come in with stunned, which is kind of a big deal because it means that the Devas can't use Mimic the turn that they're summoned in unless they want to use one of their AP to do it, which is usually not going to be something you want to do. The summon upgrade also gives them the benefit of, like, when the summon dies, they turn into a shadow marker, and then before this model moves, once per activation, it can suffer irreducible damage to drop a shadow marker. So there's a lot of shadow marker generation just by using the upgrade. But giving the model stunned and not slow is a very interesting choice, because as I said, it's a very efficient summon that's bringing stuff up in your opponent's face, and saving multiple AP for the cost of only a single Ivan AP, and the summon model is not coming in slowed. So like my Deva gets summoned, gets a made to kill attack. If I activate with it next because I want to get its AP before my opponent kills it, because those, whatever you summon is going to be a priority target. If your opponent feels like they can kill it in one activation, that's a big deal. But if they don't manage to do that and then the Deva gets to act, it's going to get 2 more attacks. Now, its attacks without triggers or the ability to use Mimic are pretty poor. Frankly, they're just not really that threatening. But it does put a lot of pressure on your opponent to kill the Deva before it gets a chance to use its 2 AP. Now, on subsequent turns, when they can use Mimic or they can use their regular melee attack with the benefit of all of their triggers, they can do some major damage. I mean, even the other summon Nocturnes are nothing to make fun of. They're a lot weaker. They're a lot easier to kill. They're super fast. Well, they're not super fast. They're very fast. They do have the potential to deal a significant amount of damage, and they can move stuff around with Displace. The trick with them is that like they're really going to be better as a flanking model, scheme marker, schemer denier, and then something that can do a little bit of scheming on their own. But they don't really have a way to get out of combat for free. They could use Displace on the opponent, but it's resistible. Like, if you summon them, it's going to take a little bit of doing to get them out of engagement with the enemy. You could potentially use a second Ivan AP to do that with Encroaching Shadows, but like that's not super efficient and it's got kind of a short range. But still, Nocturnes are very good, and they're a model that I would even consider hiring. I don't think I would ever hire a Deva, and I certainly wouldn't hire a Brock Inspector. They're just way too slow. But a Nocturne, yeah, I would do that.
So the thing about the Devas you were talking about is even if you summon them in and you summon them into somebody that has a shooting attack, let's say, so now they're engaged, they can't shoot, they have to push away, whatever it is. I mean, Devas are great little tar pits too.
Mm-hmm.
Because they have that clingy ability on the front of their card. So like when the enemy makes a move, they have to make another duel, which is another card they have to flip. And then if they fail it, then the David just moves along with them. Latch on for -1 defense. I mean, they're solid summons. Solid.
Yeah. I mean, they're essentially stat 6 because of. I mean, that's the same thing as the Spider Swarms and Arcanists. Their stat 5 is really more like stat 6. And then the clingy thing, like you said, is pretty obnoxious. Now that said, if your opponent does manage to get away from them, they suffer the same issue with mobility that Brock Inspectors do, which is that they're only move 4, and they don't have Shade Step or anything like that. So if you do manage to get away from them, then they're going to have kind of a tough time catching up with you. But yeah, I mean, they're great models. And one thing that is kind of across the keyword is high defense. Like most of the models in the keyword are defense 6, which is pretty incredible. I mean, all of the summons, even the piddly little Nocturne is defense 6. But all the summons anyway, Devas and Nocturnes especially, have low willpower. So that's one of the things that I feel like you can kind of do to take some steam out of the keyword, is if you can start swinging on especially Devas and Nocturnes with their willpowers 4 and 3, you're going to be able to, even with negative flip, stand a pretty decent chance of actually being able to get actions through, especially later in the turn when your opponent doesn't really have a lot of cards to flip. You're just flipping cards on negatives, but you're targeting such a low stat that it won't really make that much of a difference.
Yeah, I'm looking at the Brock Inspector right now, and man, he's crazy good.
Yeah, they're real good.
I mean, just enemy models within 3 cannot heal. He's terrifying 11. He has a defense willpower trigger that gives out distracted because being already at -1 doesn't hurt. Now let's make it -2. Irreducible damage 2, 3, 4 on a stat 6. Heals if he kills you. Man, they're solid models.
Yeah, and if you look at their bonus action, so this thing is pretty brutal. So Envelop in Shadows, bonus action, stat 5 targeting move, ignores concealment. Target suffers 1 damage for each friendly shadow marker or friendly Umbra model within 2 inches to a maximum of 3. You're almost always going to be getting 2 or 3 damage on that, and very frequently you are going to be getting the 3 damage, and that's a bonus action. It's pretty impressive. Plus, you get an on your heels to place into base contact, and then the fall into shadows is going to let you um, place the model in within 4 inches of its current position in concealing terrain. Now, one thing to remember is that all of the summons, Brock Inspectors, Nocturnes, and Devas, all have a 1-inch aura that counts as concealing terrain. So it's not like you're only dropping stuff into shadow markers, you're also dropping stuff anywhere within an inch of any of your summons that are within 4 inches of the target. The other thing too, this Hallowed Glory attack, I used it against you, but I realized afterwards that I actually misplayed it. I didn't do it quite right. So Hallowed Glory, it's a 1 AP action. It needs a 6 to go off. It's a 6-inch pulse. 6-inch pulse is a big deal on a 40 mil model that's getting summoned in base contact with your dudes. So enemy models within range have to pass a TN 12 or be pushed 3 inches towards this model. Okay, sure. And then any enemy models in base contact with this model suffer 2 damage. You don't have to fail the duel to take that damage. So when I summoned the Brock Inspector into the middle of your ball of Dashel badness in the backfield, you passed all of your checks, but you had 3 models that were in base contact with the Brock Inspector. So even though you passed the checks, you still would have taken the damage.
You still suffer 2 damage, yeah. Well, I'm thinking about, and you're talking about how slow they are, right? But I mean, at the same time, Envelop in Shadow has essentially 2 triggers that are going to put you engaged with it.
That's true. They do have that. The other thing, the thing that I was talking about with the slowness is more that I don't think I would hire them. And if you manage to put some distance between you, you're probably going to be in a better position. Now, with the Envelop in Shadows, if you do manage to get one of those triggers off, and obviously they can pull you back. The 4-inch fall into shadows, fall into darkness. If you're at 6 inches, you may not be able to put them into a fantastic position, but it's a bonus. So even if they pull you a little bit closer, they're probably still going to be able to charge and hit you at a 5-inch threat range. So yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah, I mean, it's a range of 6. So if I pull you back 4, I'm definitely going to be able to charge you at that point. And then on your heels, I'm just placing that model into base with you. So, I mean, you have a 50-50 chance of being able to just engage the model. I mean, they're not. I understand you're saying they're slow. I mean, they're not terribly slow.
No, yeah, they're too slow for me to hire, but Brock Inspectors will definitely be able to get back to grips with you if you get away. Maybe somewhat less so for Davis, because I mean, I'm maybe speaking too soon. Let's see if I'm talking out of my ass here. So yeah, they don't have a way to jump back into melee with you if you do manage to get away. So
Davis just have the they just have the clingy, but I mean,
right.
Depending on how far you're moving, they'll just charge you.
Well, yeah, I mean they're a stat 4 with a 0-inch engage though, so or a move 4 with a 0-inch engage, so they're going to have a tough time just charging you.
Oh, actually, they do. You lied to yourself.
I lied to myself. What did I
Yeah,
lie about?
because they're mimic.
Oh, mimic has on your heels. Okay, so if you get the okay.
Yeah. So you have that, or if I mean, they might not even need that. They can just mimic somebody else's 2-inch range attack and then charge you, or like mimic their gun. I mean, they're always going to be useful.
So maybe not quite as slow as I had originally said, because I clearly did not read the card all the way through. So, I mean, we've talked about. I don't want to spend the whole freaking podcast talking about Umbra, but
You could though.
I definitely could, because I've got quite a few games under my belt with them right now. I mean, the other things that I would say are that it's definitely a keyword that's going to reward you for properly reading the situation and carefully placing your models. it's tough to just brute force your way through stuff. Like they're not like as Dashel for a good example. They're tough to just brute force your way through stuff with like summoning executioners and summoning mounted guard and stuff like that. Like literally the whole keyword has a 2-3-4 damage track. Every single model except for Eva, who has a 2-3-3. And yeah, the master can get +1 damage pretty reliably on his ranged attack. But if he's doing his summon, he can't then take the trigger to increase his damage. So literally, the whole crew has very low damage tracks. 1-3-4 on a Nocturne, 2-3-4 on everything else, 2-3-3 on Eva. So I can't just power through stuff. You need to be a little bit more careful about how you apply your attacks. The big thing, and we kind of talked a little bit about this, is that lots of stacking negative flips, making them I mean, they already look fairly survivable because you can see that there's going to be some concealing and there's going to be some distracted. They have a lot of stat 6 for defense. The real bitch of it comes in when you're targeting like Eva or Corvus, who have flexible morality, which we haven't talked about yet. But flexible morality is basically your opponent has to discard a card, otherwise they're going to be at a negative flip when they attack you.
Yeah, it's better. It's better intimidating authority.
Yeah, exactly. It's better intimidating authority. Thankfully, it's only on 2 models. But you're going to have it potentially that. Plus, you may have to deal with friendly fire, and you may have to you're likely going to have to deal with concealment, and there's a decent chance you're going to have to deal with distracted. So when you're attacking those 2 models, you could potentially be at a quadruple negative flip, which, like, it doesn't matter if you're Parker with focus. So if you're Parker with a built-in positive flip, and you focus for another positive flip,
and you stone for
a positive flip,
you're still
going to have to discard a card to be at a straight flip.
Yeah, that's a little much. No.
Yeah, I mean, now you're not always going to have to deal with all 4 of those things at the same time, but it absolutely can happen. I mean, one of the games that I played recently was against a Parker crew, and I thought that I was going to have a really bad game because, like, he's got Blow It to Hell, because obviously he took Doc, and a lot of his models have built-in positive flips, and it didn't... Mad Dog, yeah. And it didn't matter. The amount of negative flips that my crew could dish out vastly outstripped the amount of positive flips that he could bring to the table. And I made sure to prioritize killing Mad Dog because, I mean, he's a model that does have to be kind of close to do what he needs to do. He doesn't have super long range, so I made sure to prioritize killing him and tying him up. My opponent didn't do a great job of placing his Blow It to Hells or timing them in such a way that they made sense. He would tend to activate Mad Dog very early in the turn, as you are accustomed to doing, rather than doing what he probably should have done, which is wait until he saw the moment where he could drop a Blow It to Hell and get rid of some critical shadow markers. And I just ended up walking all over Parker. Like, he couldn't do anything to my crew, and he was one of the crews that I was the most concerned about.
Yeah, hence why I said it's the negative play experience of ES.
Yeah. I mean, one thing that's kind of interesting about them is they have a very small hiring pool. I mean, basically, you're going to have Ivan, you're going to have Eva, Haven Hand, you're going to have Corvus Rook, you're going to have Gibson DeWalt. That's it. You might hire a Nocturne, maybe, if you need it. And then everything else you take is going to be out of keyword and versatile.
Well, I mean, it's not like there's a shortage of very good versatile models.
Right, and I'm not saying that you're strapped for stuff to hire. It's just interesting in that it's such a small keyword that you kind of are forced into thinking outside the box and pulling in some kind of unusual picks.
Yeah, I mean, you could probably going to take Jessie, right? Because her Soulstone Flare synergizes a bit.
I thought about that. I found that she was very difficult to utilize effectively because of all of the concealing terrain on the table, and she's not particularly fast. Her harpoon gun, more often than not, would be firing through concealment, so I'd be giving myself a lot of like negative flips, and she ended up being kind of inefficient. Soulstone Flare is very good, but I didn't after using her twice, I felt like she wasn't getting her stone's worth. I actually got a lot more mileage out of botanists, which are kind of like my ES heartthrob. Those things are freaking amazing.
Yeah, I was actually just thinking about how, like, I mean, you have enough points where you can swing things to suit your needs, right? And like botanists are one of those models where it's just like if you take them in the right situations, they're just fantastic.
And when you take them with Umbra, they're going to have 2 grow tokens first turn before they activate. Is really what's going to
Yeah,
happen.
because of the scrap.
Because of the shadow markers, exactly. So all of a sudden, first turn, they're 6 move, I think 7 defense, 6 or 7 defense, I can't recall. And they have onward, so I mean they're getting 18 inches of movement first turn without any other pushes or anything like that. They have planted roots, which is very rare. I think it's like them, Waldgeists, and Bad Juju that have it in the whole game. Planted roots is kind of amazing, and it's super good for ley lines. Like they are absolutely stellar ley lines models. I see myself taking them a lot in Umbra.
So how are you going to get 2 grow tokens? Does it start with one? Because it looks like it's only once per activation you can feed me.
Yeah, yeah, but you're creating so many shadow markers that it's relatively easy to make sure that they get removed within range of the botanists. So yeah, feed me after a terrain scrap or corpse marker within 4 inches is removed. It gains a grow token and heals 1. Well, you can throw out enough markers, and they're all destructible. That yeah, you might have to spend an AP from spend an AP from Mordrake first turn, which is not the end of the world. Use a Nocturne, use something else to get rid of another marker. And as long as you make sure that the marker you're removing is within range of 1 or even potentially 2 botanists, if you take them, you're getting grow tokens on both of them for removing 1 marker. So with a couple of bonus actions and a couple of AP, now you've got 1 or 2, defense 7, willpower 6, move 6 botanists.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. No, it's not outside of their activations
Right.
that you're actually stacking up on those. So
Right.
yeah, I mean they seem really solid for Umbra.
Yeah, they're very good. So at any rate, we've talked about Umbra a whole hell of a lot. I think we're already 40 minutes in. So maybe we can give a somewhat shorter form discussion of EVS.
Yeah, EVS, huh?
Yeah.
You want to talk about efficiency?
Yeah.
I mean, you ever imagine having when you get those hands and it's like all 9s and higher, you're like, man, this is a great hand. That's going to be like every hand with EVS.
Yeah. I mean, they're going to be loaded with good cards all the time.
So the only suit not represented in Reconfigure is a Ram, and you can take that on Maxine if you'd like. So then every card in your hand is at least a 9 or higher.
Yeah. I mean, it's having a stacked hand like that all the time is pretty incredible. And they're another crew that I mean, there aren't really that many crews that I can think of that literally every single card in your hand, regardless of value, is going to have some use or some benefit. I mean, like there's Ulix, which I just talked about in the last pod. And then I also talked to my friend John about, which you'll probably be hearing that pretty soon, folks. But that's a crew that every single card in your hand has a use. There's literally no trash card, and it's going to be the same way with EVS, but to a much greater degree. Because with Ulix, you're using your low cards for like protected and reducing damage on pigs within 6 inches, but with EVS, they're just all 9s. It's pretty good.
Yeah, just all 9s. And not only that, when you're cheating fate with a card that shares a suit with the reconfigure ability and within 8 of Maxine, you're drawing cards.
Right.
And guess what? They're all going to be doing that.
Right. And then when you're drawing cards, if you're drawing more garbage cards,
they're not garbage.
They're not garbage. And they're potentially giving you more resources to do deep discovery to cheat off the top of your opponent's discard pile.
Correct. And not only that, but if you're drawing cards, eventually your opponent's hand is going to run low. And when your opponent is sitting on an ace, a 2, and a 3, and you're sitting on a 3, 4, and a 5, you're really sitting on 3 9s. And you're going to win those duels. You're going to win those duels.
Yeah. Now, timing is going to be a big deal because you might not be sitting on the right nines. That's one of those things that's going to vary quite a bit from game to game or activation to activation. But it's not literally like you're sitting on, in your situation, 3 nines like you described. You could be sitting on 1 9, or in some situations, no nines. I mean, if your models that have the reconfigures you need have already activated, um, you might just have a 1 2 and a 3.
You could, but I mean, you could also turn those 1 2 and 3 into a 13 that your opponent just has sitting on their discard pile.
True enough.
And then, I mean, so the most common reconfigure appears to be a crow. It looks like the most models have crows. So that's a ton of models that are going to be able to use those. You're most likely going to have BB and Calypso. So that's your tome right there. And he has another way to draw cards. So he's drawing 2 cards out of the discard pile, and they don't necessarily even need to be the ones he needs. He can draw 2 cards for whoever's going to come after him, and those are going to be nines. I mean, they're certainly going to win when it comes down to hand manipulation and controlling the hands, because it's just super efficient. Maxine just hands out any condition she wants, essentially, like, to whoever she wants. So she can debuff, she can super buff, she can put on multiple models and the thing is, she can set herself up for whatever trigger she wants, because she can just look at the hand and say, oh, okay, I'm going to pick that suit that I know I need and turn these cards into it. She's just super efficient. Oh, and guess what? She let's see. She also has another Explore Society model with a leap like free action.
Yeah. You're high on the ES models with leaps and leap equivalents, right?
It's just it bothers me because just about every other master has to use an AP to put themselves in a position at some point, right? I mean, there's some that don't, and whatever, but like for the most part, you usually have to like walk or charge or something to get somewhere, and they just do it. Like they don't have a lot of wasted AP.
Mm-hmm.
Is my problem.
Yeah, definitely. There's a lot of efficiency across the keyword, and definitely saving move AP is a big deal because, I mean, as anybody who's played the game long enough knows, he who walks most tends to lose games.
Yeah, if you waste an AP walking, you've probably already done something wrong. So unless, I mean, even if it's a schemer, I mean, you have to at some point be able to scheme. But like, so you take Maxine and you take, let's see, what was that versatile they have there? Vernon
and Wells, yeah.
Yeah, you take Maxine and Vernon and Wells, and you put fast on Vernon and Wells, and that's just a 4 AP model.
And the other thing with Maxine too is that, like, when you use impromptu invention to give out a free condition, like, fast is probably going to be the one that you give out the most frequently, and pretty much every time you do it, you're going to want to be going for the ram trigger to give it to another model within 2 inches, because then then you're gaining efficiency in AP. You're not just AP trading. Like, AP trading off your master isn't really that great, so you probably wouldn't want to do impromptu invention unless you're going to hit one of the triggers. So give 2 models fast or give 1 model focus 2 those are kind of the 2 big ones. So one model I'd be kind of interested to hear your take on is Kia, because Kaya, whatever you want to call it. It seems like a lot of people don't really think she's that good, just kind of like reading, the interwebs over the last week or so. I happen to think that she's pretty damn solid. But what do you think about her?
So I think she's their version of Joss, but better in a way. It's easier for her to get shielded because she just generates it on her own. You can also make her fast, which I guess you can do a Hoffman too. It's actually they're very similar in a lot of ways. Thing is that Kaya has reconfigure,
Mm-hmm.
which is a very, very big deal.
Yeah.
Ruthless is obviously very nice. Let me see. She also has a Technophile action once per activation. When a friendly EVS model within 3 would draw a card from its fate deck, it may instead draw any value 5 or less from its discard pile that shares a suit with its reconfigure ability.
Yeah.
So you can just fish for that card you need to make sure you get
Yep.
that 9.
Fishing for 9s.
Yeah.
And then people are kind of ragging on her because they're saying, well, she's a 10 stone model with only 2 AP. Well, not really, because if you're playing her in keyword, she's going to be fast most of the time. So, like, you don't necessarily want to make a model that's going to be fast most, or if most or every turn also have like flurry or other ways to generate more AP, especially when they can do irreducible damage. Like, that would be really over the top.
Yeah, and she's probably also going to have a focus.
Right.
I mean, it wouldn't be outlandish to see her with a fast, a focus, and a shielded on her before she goes in.
Right. And some people are saying, well, I mean, she can only give herself one shielded, so yeah, she does irreducible, but she's going to only do it once in activation. Well, I mean, you could, in theory, give her shielded with Maxine. Again, that's going to be situational. I don't necessarily know that you want to be using a master AP to give a model 1 or 2 shielded, especially when somebody could just attack her, eat the shielded that you put on her, and now she's not doing irreducible damage anymore. But the Intrepid Emissary has a 3-inch aura, which is fantastic, where just any model that activates within 3 inches of it gains shielded, just at the start of their activation. So if you play the Emissary with Kia, she's going to get a shielded right when she activates. She can give herself another shielded, so that's going to be 2 attacks that deal irreducible. And that's assuming that you haven't found any other way to give her shielded as well. Like the Bellhop Porter is a great model. Definitely one that I'll be playing in Umbra. And then Maxine herself can give it out. And I'm not sure if the rest of the keyword can, but it's not as difficult to stack shielded on Kia as you might think, assuming you take the right crew for it. And like I said, she's going to have fast very frequently. So I think that people are underestimating how effective she is on the table.
I mean, let's not forget you're probably going to take a Tide Caller too.
Yeah.
And I mean, toss is a hell of an attack action, right? I mean, like, I tend to toss my own stuff more than anybody else's, and he can toss from range as a free action. So I mean, he could just toss her around wherever he wants, and then she's so he can toss her, and then she's fast with the focus and the shielded. I mean, it's just again, it's a lot of efficiency.
Yeah, for sure. And like toss in and of itself is fantastic. Now, if you're tossing on Kia, yeah, at that point you're going to need a TN 13 and you're a stat 4, so you need what? A 9? Huh, imagine that. They have so many TNs that you only need a 9 for. It's really weird, right?
Well, no, BB has one that's a 10. Unless of course it's in Calypso, and then it's a 9.
Exactly. Exactly. But yeah, I mean, so I think he is good. I think Tidecaller is fine. I mean, looking at it on its face, maybe I'm just not getting something. It seems like a perfectly serviceable 8-stone model. It's got decent front of card stuff. Toss, especially toss with heavy torrent, is incredibly good, and its attack is decent. Not fantastic, but decent. But I think really you're taking it for toss.
You know when it's better?
Hmm.
Yeah, you know when it's better though?
Hmm.
When you have Focus 2 on it, because you gave it Focus 2, and now it's spiking
There's
those 6s.
Yeah, spiking those 6s is a big deal. And it can give staggered. Whirlpool is decent. But yeah, so Tidecollar's good. I think one of the things that I see when I look at EVS, and I mentioned this to you off air, but I mean, they have a bunch of great models. Kia's really good. Obviously, Maxine can buff out of keyword and versatile stuff just as easily as she can buff stuff in keyword. Harada is really, really solid. I feel like Maxine's AP as the buffer that she is maybe aren't as impactful as they could be for a master. I mean, her other damaging actions are quite good, especially being able to force opponents to discard random cards, but she has to be in melee for that. So like, um, I think I would have to see EVS on the table. I haven't had a chance to play against them. On the surface, they seem good, but they don't seem as crazy as like Umbra or Seekers, that kind of thing.
I actually think they're better than Seeker.
Oh, you think they're better than Seekers? Seekers, I mean, I don't know.
I think they're a lot better than Seeker.
I think Seekers have a higher skill cap.
I think. All right, sorry. So let's do this right now. Let's do this now because we're going to forget later on. So
Sure.
without breaking into them, and I'm sure everybody has looked at the book at this point by now or has had some stuff spoiled. And where do you think they're going to fall as far as competitive ranking?
Sure. So you want us to do like a quick tiering of the keywords?
Yeah, I want to see, but I want to see where you think they are, and I want to see if they're going to be the same place where I think they are, because I think there's going to be a couple of them that are surprising.
All right, cool. So do you just want to literally steal a page from Schemes and Stones book and do like a bottom to top, or do you just want to kind of go with your top couple? What do you think?
Yeah, so why don't we just rank them from 1 to 8? We'll start at 8. We'll work our way up to the top and see where we agree, see where we disagree.
Okay, sounds good.
Okay, so what's your number 8?
My number 8, I think, is probably going to be Frontier. They are, I've never been terribly impressed with Frontier and Bass. I don't feel like they got enough out of the Explorer Society release to significantly improve them. I mean, Sandworm's good. Um, yeah, I'm going to go with Frontier. I'll just leave it at that.
Yeah, I'm going to agree with you on Frontier. I know there's been some people that have had some success with Bassi, but I think those are probably just exceptional players because there's really not much he gained in this at all to bring him, I think, to a level where he's even competitive with the rest of the faction, either in guilds or in ES.
Yeah, and I don't know what he needs. I don't have enough experience playing against him. I've only gotten 2 games in against him and no games with him, but he just never really terribly impressed me, and I don't feel like they filled his gaps as well as they could have. So, so we're both on Frontier for 8, huh? All right, why don't you do your 7?
I have Syndicate, and I have Syndicate because I don't think they're a fully fleshed out keyword yet. I think they're still missing some pieces, and while I think Anya's cool, um, and obviously Sovereign's awesome. I already praised Sovereign and Anya in the last episode. I just don't think that there's really enough there, if that makes any sense.
Sure. Yeah, definitely. Think that I don't think that she's as low as you're putting her, but I can definitely get what you're saying there. All right, so I would say for my number 7, I'm probably going to go with McCabe.
Really?
And Wastrel. Yeah, I mean, McCabe's awesome. I feel like he doesn't have the high cost, high impact minions in Explorer Society, unless I'm just missing something. That he does in Ten Thunders. Ten Thunders has some pretty amazing minions, especially Joragumo, that he can augment and turn up to freaking 12. And I'm just not really seeing that in an Explorer Society. He on his card is fantastic, but the rest of the Wastrel keyword I've never really been very impressed with.
That's interesting. I actually, yeah, I didn't have him there. I for some reason, the thing is with like Syndicate, I don't think Anya's bad by any stretch, but I mean, she's also in a faction where everything else is really good. To say she's like the bottom of Explorer Society is like it's like trying to, I guess, like the same with Rezzers, right? I mean, like who's the bottom of Rezzers? They're all really good. Is it Seamus? Just because Seamus isn't as good? I mean, McMorning, because McMorning isn't as good as the rest of them. You know, like they're all still very good.
Now, I mean, I'm going to say she's not far off from that slot, so I'll just go ahead and do my neck. Well, you do your number 7. Sorry.
That was my number 7. My number 6 is actually McCabe. So me and you switched out McCabe and Syndicate. Yeah.
So the reason that I put Anya above McCabe, and I think that this is probably coming from my experience as a prolific Mawtucket player, but I look at Anya's keyword, and yeah, they're missing models. Like, I mean, we'll just be straight up. Like, there have been Outcast Syndicate models teased. Like, people know about them. They're coming at some point in the future, so they may be able to fill some gaps that the keyword has. So yeah, the keyword has some limited defensive tech, but it's got a reasonable amount of healing just on Sovereign, and Anya has pretty ready access to healing as well. She also has the ability to put out multiple types of hazardous terrain, and that's where it ties back to the Mawtucket thing, because so like she makes your scheme markers into hazardous terrain. Great. Um, the surveyors can make hazardous terrain, which their hazardous terrain works a little bit differently because it's not something that you can like sit a model into. Basically, they're making a rock that you can bang people into with pushes and stuff to deal hazardous damage. And then they also have an action where they can make an aura around them into hazardous terrain. So you can have multiple bubbles with surveyors, Anya, scheme markers, and that kind of thing on the table where you're going to have like two overlapping hazardous terrain auras plus potentially knocking people into the geode markers, triggering more hazardous. So you can get a very surprising amount of damage even from low impact attacks. And the fact that it's not that they can spread those auras out across the table to do more area denial, I think is a little bit underappreciated. Um, and then the number of geode markers that you'll actually be able to get out with surveyors is probably more than you think because their chronicles ability, because they're dual keyword seeker. Anytime that Sovereign gets one of his Glory of Ridley triggers to pulse out healing, um, the fact that he can price a progress for that if he needs to is pretty good. And then Anya, every time she attacks, is, assuming she's not going for her stun trigger, she's going to be doing siphon power so that she can heal the damage that she's taking from Price of Progress. So, like, you can, in theory, put out kind of a lot of those geode markers. Now, surveyors themselves do have some issues. They're on the slow side, but they have the ability to impact the game a little further out than you think they do because of their auras and because of those geode markers. So, I mean, it's not I don't think that it's enough of a gimmick to make the keyword work without a little bit more durability, but I do feel like there's some play there. And then the other thing with them is they have the syndicate Umbra model, um, what do you call it? The operatives. Hold on, make a little timeline note there. They have the Umbra syndicate model, the operatives, which I don't think are particularly good in Umbra, but in syndicate, they strike me as pretty decent because they have arson, which anybody that's used Iggy knows what arson does. Like, you target a scheme marker, you blow it up, it pulses damage and burning. It's pretty effective. It's actually a pretty high threat attack. But the trick with Iggy is that, like, it only you have to target a scheme marker to do it. So if your opponent doesn't have a scheme marker in an advantageous position for you, or if there's not one of your own there, you just can't use the ability. And that's kind of the way that it is with Umbra too. Like, Ivan has the ability to change shadow markers into scheme markers, which you can then arson off of, but they're not necessarily always going to be in the right position. With Syndicate, you can move your markers where you need them to go. You can place markers with Anya. You can push the markers into the groups of enemies, and then you can arson, blow them up, and deal a bunch of damage and burning. So between all the hazardous terrain, the potential to do arsons to blow up scheme markers and cause more incidental damage and add the burning, I think there's more there.
No, I mean, I can see it for sure. It's just I personally don't think it's fleshed out enough where it's missing spots. And you can fill some holes obviously with versatiles. You can fill some holes without a keyword. I think that's like me putting McCabe at 6 is just because he's amazeballs fast, and his crew is going to be amazeballs fast, especially like if you take a Tide Caller out of keyword, because his Tide Caller is size 4, so he can toss McCabe and he can toss the Rough Riders. And you can just go crazy amount of distance with those models. And I mean, McCabe is just a complete pain in the ass anyway, as it is. But I just put him at 6 because I think McCabe, obviously, I think McCabe adds more.
Yeah, it's funny because I just went through this big, long-winded freaking diatribe talking about why I think Anya's better than she looks, and I still put her at 6. So I don't know why I spent all that time doing that. Sorry, folks. That was probably not that insightful after all. But yeah. So I guess we'll just move on to number 5. I'll throw mine out, and I'm gonna go with Apex.
Apex is your 5, huh?
Apex is my 5. Yeah.
Okay, I went with Seeker.
Seeker. All right. So, are you surprised at my number 5 pick?
No, because I mean, I don't think Apex is the end all be all.
You mean they're not the Apex?
They're not the Apex, no. But no, I'm not surprised because I think he is a little one-faceted. He himself, and he initially looks very scary. When they originally put the leaks out for him a while ago, he appeared problematic, and there's been some changes since they leaked that out a long time ago. And I think they've brought him down back to earth.
Yeah.
I still think he's very good, but I think he's in a good spot. I think he's in a good spot. And again, we're talking he's number 5 for you out of almost a list of all-stars.
Right.
So I can see that. I picked Seeker because I've played a few games with Seeker. I've never been terribly impressed with Seeker.
Mm-hmm.
I get what they're trying to do, but I don't think it really works the way they're trying to get it to work, as far as keeping guys alive and stuff like that. And it just becomes really confusing, and it's almost like a mini game trying to get them to work.
Yeah, for sure. So I have a higher opinion of Seeker, which we'll get to in a minute. I think that you're going to drastically disagree with my next pick, which is EVS, because we've already kind of teased that. So I put them at my number, what is that, 4?
Number 4.
Number 4, yeah.
So I put Cooper at number 4. I put Cooper at number 4 because I think while he is still very good, again, he's very one-faceted. I think I think Cooper would have an awful matchup into Umbra.
Yeah.
I do. And I think that you can more easily plan for Cooper than you can for the top 3 that I have coming up. I mean, that's really where he sits for me.
Fair enough. Yeah, I mean, I think that the reason I put EVS there is, like I said, maybe I'm just not experienced enough with playing against them. It doesn't. They've got a lot of tricks to get good cards, but I find that the quality of their actions on the whole is not quite where it needs to be to take advantage of those cards as much as maybe other crews can. Harada and Kia are the 2 big exceptions to that.
They're pretty big exceptions.
Yeah, I mean, they're kind of a big deal for sure. But yeah, I mean, I don't know. Maybe I just need somebody that's more experienced piloting them against me to really appreciate what they can do. But yeah, so.
And to be fair, I think honestly, I think Harada is probably better in Performer than he is in EVS. I think he just brings something to Performer that they desperately need.
Yeah, as if they weren't good enough already.
Yeah, no, but he brings a heavy hitter to him, and he really makes that distracted count with his Haka aura that makes the positives not matter. So it makes that distracted more meaningful.
Yeah, it's enormous.
Yeah, because it's not like Umbra where you can have distracted and concealing and friendly fire and all this other stuff. So I mean, they have to really make that distracted count.
Yeah, for sure. So who's next on your list?
Number 3, and I'm really tossing between number 3 and number 2, but I think number 3 has a higher ceiling, but I also think it has a higher learning curve. So my number 3 is Cadmus.
Yeah, I actually put yeah, I put Cadmus in the same.
It's just they have so many tricks.
Yeah, I can't wrap my head around that crew. They're like the summer of the faction.
If you've ever played War Machine, or anybody who's ever played War Machine, they know the power of. In that game, they were called arc nodes, and was essentially, it was models that you would be able to cast your spells through or your actions through from a range farther away, and that's what essentially Cadmus does. Is like the Nexus does never has to be anywhere, never has to be close, and it can just cast through the nests, the shambling nests. Um, there's so many weird little synergies to it, and like making enemy models friendly models. And i think I think it's one of those things where you really have to sit down, brainstorm the shit out of it, and like almost like set it up on like by yourself and play like a turn or two up on your own, just to figure out how everything works and how everything gels. But I think once you do that, it's got a lot of versatility in it. um, I mean, you can give the Nexus an extra set of activations, which then gives everybody else an extra set of activations, because like she can use her AP to essentially obey other models with like a weird second activation. It's got a lot of tricks to it, and it's like kind of a summoner crew, but it's not. And it takes a little bit from a bunch of stuff, because you can also upgrade your models like Nephilim do. It's got a lot of stuff to it, and I think if you can unpack it right, it's incredibly competitive.
Yeah, I'm very impressed with the game design that went into making the crew. It's kind of staggering the amount of complexity that got built into it, and not in a way that seems super busted. Like it's kudos to Weird because they did a great job with the keyword.
Yeah, and it's just awesome. It's such a badass concept. Like out of all of the Explorer Society crews, like I'm drawn to Cadmus the most. Even just thematically, like it's just such a cool idea. Like these like body snatching little alien things. I really dig them a lot, and I mean I'm probably gonna get them. I probably am. Like I'm the I like to play a faction a year, and obviously EVS is just coming out, so maybe by the time I hit my next faction, Cadmus will be the guys I go to.
Mm-hmm. So you're kicking Bayou down the road again, huh?
Yeah, fuck by
Yeah, right. So yeah, I guess that just leaves the kind of top dogs, which yeah, who's your number two?
EVS. I took EVS. I took EVS. I think 2 and 3 could really swap, but I think EVS is very, very, very efficient. Card draw wins games. They have a lot of card draw, and then all their cards are essentially usable. Um, I think when you're saying you don't think that the AP is there, like that's quality. I mean, I think you're dismissing Harada with his min 3, and Kaio with her irreducible damage. But even if we're not going to go that way and we're not worried about killing things, you can always take Vernon and Wells outside a keyword, and now you have a model that can drop 3 scheme markers in one turn. I think that there's a lot of good there. I don't know if there's a lot of bad there. I haven't really seen it. I think that they're the number two.
Maybe I'm just underrating him. So yeah, I mean, for my number two, I'm gonna go with Seeker, which I know you rated quite a bit lower, but they just the durability and the amount of tricks that the keyword can pull off are very impressive to me. I was struggling with who I was going to put in number two, meaning Cadmus or Seeker, but yeah, I'm going to go with Seeker.
I think I'm glad we both agree that Umbra is broken as shit. So,
Yeah, broken as shit might be a stretch,
yeah.
but I don't think they're quite that bad. But yeah, I definitely put them at number one.
Okay. Out of all of them, which one do you think is going to get the slightest tap of the Nerf bat?
The slightest tap of the Nerf bat. I mean, that's tough to say. I do think that there's enough trouble with Umbra that they could use some adjustments. I'd have to see Seekers and Cadmus on the table to see what needs to be adjusted there.
See that right there that should be proof enough. You have to like look into those two to see it. Umbra just hits you in the face with it.
Well, I mean, I got a bunch of games in with Umbra too. I mean, I've played 7 games with them at this point, so I
Yeah.
feel like I've got a pretty good feel for the keyword. I have 0 games in with the other 2.
Yeah, I'm just salty.
Yeah, I know you're salty. All right, you're allowed to be salty.
But yeah, I mean, overall, I was concerned when we started talking about Explore Society. I was concerned when they first leaked Cooper way back when, and I was like, wow, this guy is insane balls. But I think through the playtesting, I think that them listening to our suggestions and really taking their time and evaluating things, I think for the most part, I mean, a lot of this stuff is good, but like it's not brokenly good.
Yeah, I feel like it came out the other end in a pretty decent spot. Like, I don't feel like the sky is falling.
I do think that they're going to immediately shoot to the top of the competitive scene, but I think a lot of that is going to come to one, it's new, two, and because it's new, people are going to be playing a bunch of it, and they're all very good. So I think in the hands of top players, I think like your Cadmuses, your Umbras, your EVSs, I think even your Seeker, I'll give you credit for the Seeker. I think that they're going to be extremely good, like top level stuff. And when you have top players playing top level stuff, that tends to swing that direction.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I don't when I think about ways that I would deal with some of the ES keywords from a Bayou perspective, I I don't feel like there are too many of the keywords that I just straight up don't have answers to. Um, I've obviously spent quite a bit of time thinking about it, but yeah, I mean, when a top level player brings an Umbra crew to the table against my shooty Bayou Ophelia that doesn't necessarily have ready access to focus, yeah, that's gonna be a rough game.
But even if you bring an Umbra into like a mod crew that has tons of focus, it's still going to be a bad game.
They don't really have tons of focus anymore, but that's another story.
I mean, they do what they do.
They don't have a broken amount. They have a respectable amount that they go through very quickly. But anyway, yeah, I think that's probably a pretty good place to close the episode out. Was there anything else that you wanted to add?
No, not really. I mean, like I said, I think it's in a very good spot. I think it's going to do a lot to revitalize interest in Malifaux again, especially with some of the older players that maybe it kind of dropped off with. I know it's a tough time right now because I think Malifaux is a very competitive game that enjoys the competitive scene. It's a balanced game. It has a tight rule set and it thrives competitively. And right now, the world being the way it is, we can't have those nice things. So I think that this coming out when it's coming out, by the time this thing breaks, then we should be getting back to the swing of things, and I think we'll be in a fine spot. I think the ES release, as far as rules wise, it was a great success. I like them thematically as well, and like even the fluff. I was reading some of the fluff, and the fluff is just great. And I'm not even like a real fluff bunny, but I mean it really because it's all brand new stuff. I want to read it and just get a feel of what the masters are and everything and see if it matches up thematically with how they play. And for the most part, it does. I think the book came out very well. It's very well formatted. And honestly, I'm excited to see these things on the table. It's something new. It's something fresh.
Yeah, for sure. I feel like they did. This kind of goes back to the way that they handled the playtest and going into 3E. I really feel like Weird has knocked it out of the park with doing huge releases all at once for like an entire faction or for basically an entire game going into 3rd edition and making sure that things are relatively balanced. Now, yeah, they have been leaning on the community to do playtesting, and I know some people are kind of salty about that. They don't feel like they should be doing Weird's work, but I think that it's really the best approach. And I think that it's done a great job at maintaining power levels by and large across factions and across the game. Like, I can't think of any other game company. Now, I'm not a huge gamer in the sense that I play a ton of systems, but I can't think of any other game company that's managed to put out and the entirety of their game updated for a new rule set with every single model that's come out covered, and managed to make sure that most of them are fairly well balanced. That's a real achievement.
Yeah, and it's something that there was obviously a big flame post on Weird Place about like the where the place of the game is right now, the health of the game. Is it dying? Is it not dying? And I think it would be disingenuous to say that it's not in a rough spot right now. But what isn't, right? Every game system is in a rough spot right now. I mean, it's not Games Workshop where they can just release the next newest Space Marine and everybody's going to buy it. But I think it managed to survive the transition from 2 to 3. Okay, which some games just don't survive that. And now it's got this going on with COVID and everything, and it's still managing to survive. And I think just because it's in a spot right now where you're not seeing a ton of tournaments or anything like that, the fact that people are still talking about it, and honestly, right now is a good time to drop Explorer Society, because people can talk about it, people can get excited about it, they can theory foe in their heads, and when it comes time to play again, everybody's eager to do so. I think that's a big spot where GW capitalized when they released Age of Sigmar second edition. They released it in kind of the lull of War Machine and Malifaux when they were going through their edition changes, and they kind of did it again with this edition of 40k at the beginning of well, not really the beginning, but kind of in the middle of the whole Corona thing. So I think right now is a great time for Explorer Society to drop, get people thinking. How are you going to fight it? How are you going to play it? Which one's your favorite one? What are you going to do to paint it? It just brings it back into the forefront, and that's a good place for it to be.
Yeah. And, I would say that Malifaux is not a game that Weird just can print money for, like GW can, like you said, with Space Marines and all their other releases. It's a game that is in a tough spot in a sense. I don't want to make it sound like the game is on the downturn like any more than any other game, but you think about it and it appeals to the competitive scene. It is not an easy game to get into. I mean, let's be real. Like the monetary investment is very low as compared to most other games, but the amount of time that it takes to learn how to play the game well is pretty staggering to some players. Like if somebody's coming into the game and I into any game and I say, you're going to lose your first 15 games, do you think they're really going to want to stick around? You're probably going to lose your first 15 games in Malifaux, especially if you're playing in a community that's already established. And that combined with the relatively long form, games. I mean, we're talking like 2 to 3 hours. 2 hours is a short 50 stone game. Usually you're talking 2.5 to 3.5 hours, especially if it's going to be like a newer player or somebody playing a new crew. So that's a big chunk of time where you're going to lose a shitload when you're learning a new crew or learning the game in the first place. And it's a game that really thrives in the competitive scene that we can't really have right now. So I would say the best thing that we can all do as fans of what I definitely consider to be the best war game that I've ever played is support Weird, support your community, get new players in, play on Vassal if you have to, run leagues, like do whatever you can to pump the community up. It is a game that needs the community to support it. It's not a game that can support itself like maybe some others can.
And you got to get those reps in, right? Like now is a perfect time. If you plan on playing this thing competitively, get those reps in. I mean, to get your Vassal games in, if you can, get your in-person games in, either at a house or at a store that's letting you play. But now is the time to get those games in, try new things, try out gimmicks that, maybe you've been thinking about, and really develop it. So when it comes down to getting those tournaments in and getting that competitive play in, you're ready for it.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, like, I'm super psyched that I just bought my Nightmare Mayfang crew. And people may poo-poo Mayfang saying that she's not the greatest thing in the world. I don't really care. It's an awesome crew. I'm going to play it. I'm going to lose a ton of games. Got to get the reps in. So yeah, thanks for hanging out. We managed to fall in just under the hour and a half mark. So go us. Anything else you want to add, Adam? No?
No, that's it. Happy gaming.
All right, cool. Happy gaming and stay weird, folks. Little intro music plays. Yeah.
Cue music.
So that
So,
aside,
I think you could.
yeah. You put a little edit mark here.
I mean, he's like,
because we're awesome. Edit. All right, finish your thought, sir.
not to.
Yep. Yeah, definitely.
So I think they certainly win they certainly win when it comes to having. I'm sorry, I'm brain farting here.
It's all right.
I mean,
edit note.
Yeah, thanks.
Timeline footnote. There we go.